Okay, so I'm running a bit behind, but question 28 for RPGaDAY 2016 is the thing you'd be most surprised a friend had not seen or read. Now this is a bit of a difficult question. I'm not really sure where it was going, but I think I'd be most surprised that a friend had not seen or read at least some version of Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. As one of the sort of seminal works in fantasy world building and mythic fantasy journeys and cycles, I'd be extremely surprised if one of my friends hadn't at least got some awareness of it. Now, this is in part bolstered by the movies that were made by Peter Jackson of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit later on, although I quite enjoyed those movies. I know a lot of people weren't keen on the later movies, but certainly the Lord of the Rings films really captured that whole sort of epic scope of the original story. And it's not always the easiest to read, but it does create a very interesting and detailed world. I myself have a Tolkien bestiary book, which is one of my favourite books, which details all of the history, various different creatures, places, etc. And obviously there was Tolkien's own The Silmarillion, which he wrote about the history of Middle-earth, which is quite a dense and very difficult book, in my opinion, to read. I've never made it all the way through it, although my younger brother has read it a couple of times and very much enjoyed it. But I think as one of the sort of oft-quoted fantasy sort of genre setters, as it were, it really is worthwhile, even if you later decide that that's not your particular flavour of fantasy, it really is worthwhile looking at Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, etc. as one of the sort of publications that paved the way for an awful lot of fantasy worlds and fantasy subgenres that came along later. And certainly if you haven't got time to read the books, and Tolkien doesn't have the easiest writing style for everyone to get into, it's worthwhile persevering. They're very enjoyable books. However, if you maybe don't fancy the books, you don't have time for those, there are always the films, and although they miss out a few bits and they obviously alter it slightly to fit it into a different format, films as opposed to books, they are still very worth watching, if not for the story, which is a very good one, for the aesthetic that the direction brings to the film and how the particular vision of Middle-earth is brought to life by the director. So if you're one of the like 3 people in the world who's not seen the films, I'd highly suggest you go out and have a look at them. And it's definitely worth doing to see how a director re-envisages and reimagines an existing campaign world, puts their own touches on it, and how they visually bring them to life and the tips and techniques they use to do that. It's certainly something worth thinking about if you're creating your own fantasy world. So there we go. Question 28 for me would be, thing you'd be most surprised a friend had not seen or read would be Lord of the Rings, Middle-earth, J.R.R. Tolkien, one of the original sort of trailblazers for the fantasy mythic world. So I'll see you soon for question 29. Take care and happy gaming.